was a terrifying introduction. I hope this is one of the great delights of these places is there's not always a clock so you can see it. So you're going to gesticulate, aren't you, will you? When time's on. Anyway, yeah, 50 years. The good thing about doing these things, very fallible predictions, is you're dead by the time they tell you you're wrong, which is obviously kind of handy, really. I'm sure we all see these things, these ridiculous extrapolations into the future, and then we look at how the future really is. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. Science fiction writers always get it right because they always propose every possible future, so one at least of them has got it right, but I'm afraid I'm more up with Douglas Adams when it comes to talking doors and things. Anyway, very foul. Remember, good monitoring saves money. Say this to your project manager. Oh, it's expensive. It will help you save waste. Do you want to save 20 half-eye ISOs on that? This side. It's very simple, but let's crack on. The man, John Dunstall. How many people here have actually worked with the man? A reasonable smattering. We're all getting a bit old now and tired and things like that, but he was a great guy. He was intelligent, decisive. He listened. He'd done it for real. He'd done the wind scale fire. He knew about it. This wasn't a theoretical process of health physics, radius protection. This was for real. He had a very good hard stare. You always value a boss who looks at you. When you said something dumb, he would look at you and you had about 3 seconds to go, this is wrong. I will change this completely. He was totally unimpressed by status, which was quite nice, though a bit dangerous. He once said to some very senior civil servant who had criticised him for making statements on health, he said, well, we were here all weekend, you people turned up on Monday afternoon. I thought, well done. It's probably the end of our budget, but well done. And he was he was a great presenter, and he definitely wasn't a government spokesman said. He wasn't a grey man by any stretch. And there's a really nice thing. I tried to download this. If you go onto this, you can find the New Scientist thing. You can find it quite easily. We, the junior ranks at NRPB, thought he was a very good thing. He was a great man to work for. What would you thought of me standing there? Dear God, I've been referred to as the instrument geek. Unfortunately, McNitt is not here. He's gone back to America. They repatriated him. And Frances Fry once referred to me as Mad Pete. Those of you who remember Frances will know she was a very wonderful lady, with much miss. Will know she had her own eccentricities. So you would have been surprised. Certainly. You might have thought it was funny, but, well, maybe, let's see what you think. Okay, RP in 50 years. What will life be like on Earth in 50 years? Will it be very much different? What will be left over from our era? We're inheritors. We spend a lot of time tidying up what the guys who now aren't here anymore, the Ron Claytons of this world and people like that, the people that we've all read their regrettable exits from this world recently, what they were in charge of, uses and abuses of radiation, and what will the public worry about it? Will they worry about it the way they do sometimes seem to? We'll give it a go. Life on Earth. The villains of the piece. Okay, who are the dudes? Come on, dude on your left. Darwin, well done. Yes, you usually get this guy that looks 300 years old and things, but this is a younger Darwin. And the person on the right of the screen, Richard Bull is not allowed to answer. Who knows what the... What? Don't you? All right, I thought you would. Who knows who's the guy on the right-hand side of the screen is? Maxwell. No, it's a guy called Wallace. He worked out the theory of evolution at very much the same time as Darwin, and Darwin used to say it was our theory, and he acknowledged his contribution. They just worked out humanity. Well, we're an evolutionary success, like rats, cockroaches, things like that. This is a bit insulting, but... Early stage of an organism has to exploit its environment with very little inhibitions. You have to boldly go as an organism, to Captain Kirk. So we're aggressive as a group, as a species. We're a bit aggressive. We're also very, very tribal. This is quite obvious. Some of us are from Scotland, others are from Liverpool. Hi. We're obedient to authority. You will take up that rifle. You will invade Russia, even when you don't want to, most of the time. We're prone to take the short-term view. It's how will it affect our careers? How will it affect our families? We take the short-term view, a lot of us. And we're incurably optimistic. We are, aren't we? We always believe, most people believe, it'll be all right in the day, it's going to work out fine. But are these qualities good in the long term? Think of it. Are they? What do you think? This is a long-term survival strategy, being like this, being these aggressive, energetic, hugely successful species. So will we be able to afford radiation protection in 50 years? Global warming. Any American Republican voters here in the audience? No, maybe not. I think we'll go for global warming as something of a proven concept. Exactly why and exactly how fast, who knows, but we've got global warming. We certainly have overpopulation. We're living beyond our means. Economic collapse, potentially. Pandemics. NRPB mutated into HPA, which is mutated into PHE. Well, I suppose that's a way of putting it. That's a bit... And let's be honest, PHE, the thing that's in PHE's face are things like SARS. Global pandemics. We can spread, we've got airlines, we get all over the world. It's in China today, it's in New York tomorrow. Loss of effective antibiotics. We're running out. Antibiotics are getting less and less effective. All these diseases that used to kill people, like pneumonia and tuberculosis, it just stopped. Didn't stop, but vastly reduced killing people for years, most of our lifetimes. Polio, for example, just sort of disappeared in my lifetime. We lose effective antibiotics. Are we going to start suffering from that? We've got the running out of major resources. We think of oil and things like that, but phosphates for fertilizers. We are using up all these things really rather fast. So that's us doing stuff. But then you get things like global eruptions, the Yellowstone super volcano, which is, it makes good horizon. It's a sort of science porn, I suppose, if you call it. But you get these, you have this capacity to dump a whole bunch of dust and acid into the atmosphere, and we would find it difficult as a species to ride that out. Meteor impacts, again. That was wonderful. Wasn't the good thing about dashboard cameras? For the first time in life, you could see something whizzing into space and colliding with things. But it didn't leave a big hole in the ground. It's difficult to find the bits. Now, some meteors have left some very big holes in the ground. Gamma bursts, something a bit more obscure. So, in 50 years, the population may have something rather more immediate to spend their money on, worry about, than radiation protection. It's a possibility. Then the big one. That's a wonderful one. In nuclear war, all men are cremated equal. It's a wonderful phrase. If you look it up, it was a guy who was a jazz saxophonist or something like that. Anyway, he was one of these guys with a wonderful way with words, and that's one of his phrases. If we have the big one, World War III, we'll have to worry rather a lot about radiation protection. But we'll be a bit more relaxed about the dose rates, I feel. So why could we? We could have... somebody could just start it. Who's the gentleman in the middle? That's right, well done, well done. From the film? Well done. Those of you who haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, you must watch Dr. Strangelove. It is absolutely stunningly brilliant movie. Anyway, he decides to start World War III on his own. That came out at the same time as a much more scary film, because this is a comedy called Failsafe, which proposed the failure of a computer-based identification and command system, which sent the B-52s off to bomb Russia. And they came out at almost exactly at the same time. Dr. Strangelove made a huge amount of money, and Failsafe didn't, but it might be the better film. Now, who's Stanislav Petrov, the bloke on the bottom? Who is that guy? Anyone know? He's the guy who definitely didn't start World War III. He was sitting in front of a state-of-the-art, it's always a dangerous phrase, as we know with computers, isn't it, Doug? Do you believe them? Anyway, when his system told him that there was a missile attack on its way, everything fitted. He did not believe it, he wasn't confident of it, and he didn't do anything about it. So he's the guy who didn't start World War III in 1963 in the Russian military. Can you imagine having the courage to ignore standing instructions and say no in 1963 in Russian? So we got that close to it. That was one. There's probably more occasions. That's the one that's well known. Okay, big decisions. Nuclear power or not. I'm sorry, this is a bit nuclear biased. It's partly my history. It's partly where the big arguments are. Medicine, radiation in medicine is good. That's an easy one to answer, mostly. Fission or fusion? Current machines or something new or something revived? Fission power pro. It's much better than setting fire to things, isn't it, really? Because you can use things like wood and oil and coal much more effectively than setting fire to stuff. It's compact. Wind generators. Yeah, no, there's 100 of them out there somewhere. They're great things. Yeah, fine. How many wind generators do you need to replace one serious nuclear power station? 1,800 of them. It's a lot of wind generators, isn't it? And that's only for about 30% availability, which even in nuclear power terms is absolutely terrible availability. And also a decent energy storage system, which we don't yet have. We have no real means of storing vast quantities of electricity except pump storage, which is a hydroelectric system, which is hard work. Some of the reactors, so nuclear has a lot going for it, and some people now are running reactors very, very effectively. They get things like 95% availability, load factors, good. But we have against it, we have clearly two major accidents. The one, our 30th anniversary, which contaminated an awful lot of the former Soviet Union, and here, and sheep. We only stopped doing the sheep 10 miles south of here about 4 years ago or something. It's not long. So we had two serious accidents that actually contaminated large chunks of the world. We had 3 Mile Island, which melted the reactor but didn't get out. So we've got a bit of history with that, and obviously it's getting funding is difficult in a market economy for something as big and essentially contentious as a nuclear power station. It's not something pension funds find comfortable to put their money into. But anyway, don't hit me with them negative waves so early in the afternoon. Who's the gentleman down on the right? Go on. It's Donald Sutherland, but what character? Oddball from the film Kelly's Heroes. Yeah, don't hit me with them negative waves. Let's go for fission-based nuclear power. There'd still be demand for radiation protection, obviously. So what would we hope for? We'd hope for better designs. Everything, you have to allow for the maturation of technology. We get better when we make things. More remote maintenance, better materials, lower corrosion rates, and lower neutron activation. So hopefully, in all honesty, we need it less. For some reason, did we get a laser pointer with this thing? No, I don't think we did. Anyway, let's try that. Is my phone working well enough to do this? Not really. The graphs at the top, you see the graphs, the bottom graphs are the fins posing lightly. They are the doses from their PWRs and BWRs, because the fins seem to be able to run nuclear power stations extremely effectively. The ones above are European averages for doses over that period. You can see how much better, even with existing technology, we are getting on the doses in the operation of nuclear power. Better fuel, lower discharges. The fuel integrity is much better. Fuel leaks are a big curse. They're coming down. People can make fuel better and better. We've got established waste routes-ish for both fuel and materials. So I think the consequence of this is, in the future, if we are generating electricity by nuclear power, we'll need less RP. I think we have to treat that as a good thing, because the better the process works, the more efficient the machine, the more reliable it is, the less radiation protection we require. So let's hope so. So in some ways, 50 years' time, we've got PWRs, we won't need as many people. Hopefully, in all honesty, even though I don't want to see. EPR, the new one, advances over previous pressurized water reactors, thicker concrete. These are the advantages we came up with. The ones on the left, more backup diesel, more safeguarding systems. But it's quite interesting. Well, and against that, we can set the disappointing build progress. It's not been going that well in France and Finland, in honesty, building the new generation. Is it too big? Is it too complex? Is it too ambitious? Have we pushed a technology too far? AGR is still a much safer reactor in many ways. You don't need secondary containment in an AGR, far less making it robust enough. And obviously, thicker concrete, it's not proof against deliberate attack. Anybody recognise the object in the top right-hand corner?
Grand Slam or a tall boy?
Well done, it's a tall boy, yes. Excellent. 1944 technology. It's the thing that destroyed the missile bases in the north of France by going through 23 feet of concrete. So you can have a nuclear reactor and you can make it proof against accident, but you'll never be proof against deliberate attack. So AGRs, I'm a bit of an AGR enthusiast. I've never worked. Anyone else like AGR? Yeah, good few. A few hands, John. Well done, that's right. Yeah. Well, Alan would, because you had one, didn't you? It was yours. Mr. Marsh had two of his own to play with, didn't he? Yeah. EDF presentation on AGR. Their bit's in black, my bit's in blue. This is quite fun. It was quite nice to be able to. I just had a look, and actually EDF were quite keen on PWRs, obviously, in other parts of the world. But high temperature reactor, you get better quality steam out of an AGR. It's coming from a long line of ship's engineers. You want nice, hot, superheated steam because it means you've got a sensible turbine, and it makes for much more efficient generation. Low power density, which means it's difficult to make the thing angry. You would have been upset, Alan, if you'd lost all the coolant, but on the other hand, you wouldn't have been running around like headless chicken, would you? No, that's good. There you go. Alan used to do these things for a living, so it's already a gas. That's the good thing about gas-cooled reactors. They don't boil. You don't suddenly lose the coolant density if you lose pressure. High thermal inertia, it all happens very slowly, much slower to respond. A whole bunch of reasons why AGR is rather good. It's just too damnably expensive. I think that's really what it comes down to. But otherwise, in terms of safety, even the best PWR is not as good as Alan's 30-year-old, Alan's ex-30-year-old advanced gas-cooled reactor. So will we have some new reactors for our successors? I decided, as part of the democratic process, I'd ask my MP, which is quite interesting. He's a medic. He keeps standing out, he's a medic, and he's for part of Oxford, and he keeps having a gentle complaint that a lot of people come and see him, point out they're real doctors, for he's just a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, and he's a bit aggrieved about that. And I asked him the question, obviously he didn't answer this, and this is what I got back. It says basically, we're going to allow people to, we're making it easy for people to invest in new power, clean power generation. I came back with this bit. It's an awful lot. The amount of coal, we're closing down the nuclear power stations, we're closing down the coal-fired power stations. We've got an awful lot of electricity to make up in the next few years. Where's it all going to come from? But interesting. We used to have 140% capacity in the UK. If we lost a chunk of the grid, something went wrong, we could back it up. We're down to 104. It's not a lot. So where are we going to get all this extra power? And the point about, of course, the wind turbine thing comes up time and time again, but they only average 30% of their rated output. Renewable, politicians love this. It's 3 times more. Unfortunately, 3 times not a lot. It still isn't a very big number. Fundamental weakness. The UK has enough solar power to support almost 2 million homes. See comments on wind power. Great. We are, the house Ms. Mobbs and I own is a net generator of electricity over the year, but it isn't in the winter, it isn't in summer. All boils down to the political approach seems to be the market will deal with the problem. I worry about this, but will this result in problems for the health foods community? But anyway, a well-known tool retailer solution, if you have a spare £5,500, is one of these. If you're feeling nervous, this may be something of an investment. So we have a problem. We have a problem with the UK's electricity supply, which will impact on the profession of radiation protection almost inevitably. We'll always need, even if we don't go for nuclear power, we'll always need a demonstrable energy response because we live next door to Europe. The channel is only 20 miles wide. The probability of major accidents falling rapidly, we've identified, or they've self-identified the weaker designs. The RBMKs have been modified and increasingly shut down. And so we're confronted with the problem is how much money do we spend, or how much money will our successors spend on dealing with a low probability, high consequence event? It's a very difficult decision to plan for. A one in so many tens of years event. High consequence, if not in reality, certainly in public perception. If we have an accident in France or in Germany and the wind's blowing the wrong way, then it will land on us and we will have to deal with it. Will we have the capacity? Belinda Kershaw, who I work with, I asked lots of people for comments, but I put this one on. I think those of us, particularly those people who've had serious command in terms of radiation protection, will hopefully sympathize with this. We don't have many accidents anymore. This is good. This is what we are for, to avoid having accidents. But the problem is, if you've never had a horrible, nasty, unexpected thing happen to you, there's an awful surge of adrenaline, and you can't practice for that. That moment when somebody bursts through and you go, oh, and you suddenly think, what am I going to do? That moment of panic. And there's too much of this. I've been on a course, I've got a checklist, I can hack it sort of thing. It'll be very interesting to do this. And I think this would be a great opportunity for the SRP. A nice training opportunity where we put things in. How many people played in serious emergency accidents? For about the first 2 minutes, you have to work at it and believing it. And after a while, and certainly in my experience, you kick in and you behave exactly like it would be. This includes having to go around the next day and apologize to people for swearing at them. Because it becomes real. And in your heart, in your head you know it's not real, but in your heart, you treat it as real. And it's very easy to do this. And we need that. I think if we're going to have a radiation protection threats, we really need that chance to have that bowel slackening, sweaty moments that you have. You are there and you will deal with this, and there is no bleeding option moment. And it is not a process of a check seat. Maybe SRP can do that. It would be good fun. I'm sure Colin Partington would be good at this. Fusion. Fusion is great. My first governor, the late and mostly lamented Obergruppenführer White, told me that in 1975, that when he was my age, somebody had told him that fusion power would be along in 20 years. That was in 1955. And it's all seemed to be about 20 years away. We first had fusion neutrons from ARE and zeta, which weren't really there as it turned out. Isn't that wonderfully 1950s? There's standing there and with all the high-tech equipment and the tweed jacket and the pipes. Isn't it tremendous? It's just really... It's very, very, very BBC news, isn't it? So, something surprised me. You get this 100 million degrees centigrade. It sounds like a huge amount of energy. I'd never worked it out before I did this. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. How much energy is it? Anyone got an idea? Anyone in their eyes? Somebody must know. Hopefully I'd got the sums right. I think I did, because that's the answer. Am I wrong? Does anyone know if I'm wrong? No. You think it's right? Wow. You see, 100 million degrees C. Wow, that's a lot. 13 keV. Big deal. You know, it's the energy of an aggressive tritium beta particle. It's not a lot, is it? And we don't run screaming from tritium betas. But anyway, it's a pretty photograph. And I thought, I'd never worked that out before. And that's really fun. And this is the official prediction. This is happily lifted off the earth, so nobody can complain about this. You can see it, 2040s. Yeah, fine. How are we doing? Are we good on that? 2040s, maybe. So obviously, as we finish closing down our coal-fired power stations and our AGRs, and we're left with Sizewell B thrashing away, then it's going to be quite interesting to find out we're not going to have the help of fusion power to deal with that. Maybe 50 years' time, yes, but not in the immediate future. This is good, isn't it? Isn't that wonderful? I looked up a thing about bets on this longbets.org. It's lovely, isn't it? 2050. Somebody's putting $1,000 on the process. There will not be a working power-generating fusion reactor. Well, can I speak to you're still our president, aren't you, Pete? Speak to me. You're still president, aren't you? Are you going to put $1,000 on this? Just so, you know, put the SRP's money where its mouth is?
Yeah, we'll speak to Gary.
Okay, right. Okay, but I think Mr. Seif would probably be quite pleased to get another bet, you know, something to look forward to. But it's interesting that, all right, it sounds a bit frivolous, but there's a case where somebody's put that up, and even people are prone to have a bit of a punt, let's be honest, I'm not taking the man up. It doesn't say what the odds are, it's obviously just even. But someone might realise there's a much easier way to do it. I deeply hope this, because we worked ourselves into a bit of a corner. There's no easy technological solution. Lord Kelvin, wonderful quote, 1900. Isn't that good? No more physics left, nothing clever. What happened not long after that? Relativity, quantum mechanics, electronics, the whole world fell about us. All of a sudden, physics, up till then, we realized it's just some sort of screaming approximation to reality. I just hope that there's something out there we haven't thought of. It would be good if somebody woke up one morning and thought, I know how to generate electricity. I don't know. Dark matter and dark energy, I worry about those. I think they're just sort of accounting conveniences, really. Well, you know, it's just we don't know what it is, so let's give it a name. And you give it a name, it's not so frightening, is it? Let's be honest. What's left from 50 years ago? Radium luminizing, bash, burn, and bury. We've got lots and lots of that stuff. World War II aircraft all over other vehicles, things like that. The thing on the right is RAF Carlisle, the thing on the left is Harry Ash. Unfortunately, we're running out of elderly paratroopers with far too much attitude, but there we go. That's a reasonable, do you think that's a reasonable summary of Harry? Yeah. Anyway, Harry's very good at plootering around in the mud, isn't he? So that's a particular radium cleanup process. Sellafield legacies from the 1950s-ish. Soon, somebody said today, maybe even today, no more pile fuel in the pond. It's happening very quickly. It's been in there since 1957. Isn't that a long time? It's been in there rotting since 1957. There's lots of things at Sellafield which, in my view, my personal view, unfortunately I don't work for an organisation, are wrong. Things that were left for far too long to deal with. Magnox fuel, pile fuel from the Windscale piles, etc. But with now people getting on with this now, we should have got rid of these things, which will make Sellafield a much less worrying place. When these things from 50 years ago and 40 years ago have gone, it'll be a much less worrying place than it is now. In the future, Sellafield will still be there, but it'll be much safer, there'll be better buildings, it'll be properly managed. Maybe we'll have a new MOX plant, because one of the best ways of getting rid of plutonium, making it unattractive for people to steal to make weapons, is to turn it into nuclear fuel. So there's clearly going to be a need for RP, certainly at Sellafield, but probably much reduced need. In the same way, we will be on top of things a bit more. More installed monitoring equipment. Why do we have to send people out waving probes? To the extent we do. Loose surface contamination, very much a thing of the past. If we go back, I was trained by a guy who had been a Windscale health physics foreman, charge hand, and he was totally relaxed about. He didn't look forward to it, but he was not bothered by loose contamination. It's something he just did, and he did it very well. But now we're losing that capacity, which is good, because it means we're stopping loose contamination. No more fuel reprocessing, so we don't dissolve things. But we might still need beach monitoring. It's a happy job, isn't it, down on the beach at Seascale? So there'll still be a need for radiation protection at Sellafield. Scotland's approximate near equivalent. Further down the road to be no real problem. The shaft, the infamous Dounreay shaft, the only licensed ILW disposal facility. A large hole in the ground full of water with a very strange pH, into which people threw at least one motorbike. What was it? Sunbeam, was it? There you go. Michael Ball says it's a Sunbeam. You can trust him on this matter. Gordon said he gave him the seat back. Anyway, but the rest of it's in there. Cans of sodium and all sorts of things. And it did on one occasion explode. Fortunately, we are dealing with this. The next generation will not have to deal with this. And it's going to be very, very tidy. But we may still have the infamous beach particle problem, but what will that need? A few guys every now and again. So not a lot of need for radiation protection at Dounreay. So what will the future think of us? I think we've all worked quite hard on this. We did our best to promote the clean up all them things that were done in a mad rush after World War II. Ernest Bevin, this is the wonderful phrase, this is the decision to build the UK's first atom bomb. After he's patronised by an American Secretary of State, I think. I love that phrase, isn't it? You have to bloody Union Jack on top of it. We pushed doses to the workforce down a lot. In my career, certainly workforce doses have dropped by an order of magnitude. I think that's reasonable. We got into the habit of telling people the truth. We got out of the 1950s, 1960s, there is no cause for concern mentality, and started telling people the truth, because people will find out these days. We got on top of radon exposure to the public. There was a guy called Mick something or other, worked for NRPB a long time ago, and said the thing that will be a problem is that we don't accept is radon. And he was told, no, this is rubbish. But then, Mick, come on, Tracy, do you remember what he's called? Yeah, no, it was before. He just overlapped with me anyway. But he was the one who put his finger on it. He said that we're not taking radon seriously. We've got on top of this, top of the radon exposure of the public, very much. Better imaging techniques for medical use, certainly. And we'd really tried very, very hard to find out how dangerous radiation really is. And one of our triumphs of our profession, and maybe our predecessors as well, is that it's very difficult to work out how dangerous radiation actually is. And this may sound silly, but I think that's a triumph, because it means we haven't killed lots of people, thank God. Now, we have run, even from the beginning, even from the early stages of post-war nuclear work on radioactivity, we have run it sufficiently well that we have not caused an excess, a really obvious excess death rate in the workforce. So we've done pretty good. And we bent our minds to finding non-radiation ways of doing the same job as well, which is always, in many ways, a good argument. But what is a bit weird, we continue to use the low-level waste repository, knowing that C is looking forward to getting it back. Not in 50 years, but it is looking forward to getting it back. It's part of the plan. The doses will be trivial. I know that. But it's still going to look a little bit eccentric, ladies and gentlemen, in 50 years' time when people find or 100 years' time when people find half-ISOs on the beach. People are going to say, why did we use this facility? But there we are. That's the only thing I can put my finger on and think this is going to cause people to be puzzled in the future. And we're currently a long way from doing something about ILW. It will be discussed in 40 years. This is, again, is a straight lift of, I can't remember which website it is. We're talking about 100 years. We're talking about this 50 years, 15, 20 years to get started, 100 years on to deal with it. So there will still be a need to dispose of ILW and deal with ILW in 40 years' time. Will he think we are too cautious? Now, I missed out on Roger Coates' thing this morning, unfortunately, which I think there's an argument for saying we were too cautious. The excessive evacuation at Fukushima killed lots of people. Some of them weren't very well, but it did kill lots of people. It's easy sums. Delicensing, we asked an excess of not more than 0.3% over background for the most limiting foreseeable scenario. That's a very low fraction of background, isn't it? We assume that in the future, land use will be uncontrolled. As soon as we stop actively regulating land, gentlemen from CEPA, all of a sudden, there'll be no regulation at all. There'll be no memory. There'll be no control over it. We assume that we stop using this waste site, we take the signs down, and there's a guy there growing his crops, living there, and getting his well water out of it. If we've lost that ability to remember things, the world is in such a mess, there'll be far more important things to worry about than radiation. So I think that's us being just a rather bit too cautious. Okay, things that could turn into RP problems. CT scanning. Very popular. The top line is Greece. For some reason, the Greeks are very fond of CT scanning. Americans tend to use CT scanning because there's pressure to use the best available technology to detect a potential disease. But on the other hand, they're quite dozy things. This is the current view in the literature. Possible excess in cancers starting to show up, particularly in people exposed when young, as usual. It's a very useful tool, obviously. If you are ill, potentially with a potentially life-threatening disease, then it's a very easy decision. CT scans are a good idea. But for some investigations, it's the risk higher than the benefit. It's obviously a cracking target for epidemiology, which I'm sure people do take rather seriously at the moment. And as usual, we get the usual onset of the delay between the onset of exposure and the onset of disease. And a lot of the people that we do irradiate are seriously ill, but still. Okay. Personal experience. Identify the building in the top right-hand corner. Any ideas? It's the West Cumberland Hospital. Identify the object in the immediately below. It's an aerobar, yeah, right. How do we connect the West Cumberland Hospital with an aerobar? Well, I'll show you how you do this. Dead easy. I had a moment. We'd like to give you a CT scan. What is the dose? I replied, fairly reasonably. Are you one of these nuclear idiots? Well, fair enough, it's in Whitehaven. Are you one of these nuclear? I missed that. Yeah, I am. So, what's it you, pal? It's 5 millisieverts. That's a lot. There you go. You have a spine that looks like an aero bar that someone has stood on. Do you want this? Okay. Yes. Cost-benefit analysis, 1 second. And if you look at that, that is, let's go back one. This is where I break it. 5 millisieverts, that's the 10 microsieverts. That's 500 years of living on a de-licensed site. It took me 1 second to decide. Sounds proportionate. But we all worried about the famous Alice Stewart spectre, the lady who found out that irradiation of the fetus was extraordinarily damaging in comparison to the then current theory. Nobody believed her. She was a bit of an abrasive lady, let's be honest, but she was a very good scientist. She collected huge amounts of information, and she forced through the recognition that basically irradiation in utero was very bad for you. So hopefully CT scan isn't going to give us one of those. We're prepared for the Alice Stewart thing. We try and keep on track of doses. There's a lot of pressure to keep doses under some sort of control. So I'm not worried about UK. How am I doing for time, Guff? Okay, magic. Okay, I'm an instrument techie, I'll admit to that. Instrument geek, sorry. Thank you, Nick. Measurement stuff. Quantities and units, this is the point where people's face. How many people here have done at some point the equivalent of the NRPB postgrad radiation protection course? Yeah, right, okay. And didn't we all look forward to quantities and units? The guy next to me climbed out the window. He just slid the window open and just out like that. Fair enough. Okay. We use ambient dose equivalent rate. It's been around for 30 years' time. There's a lot of history with it, but fine. A favourite interview question. Tell me about ambient dose equivalent rate, because it just was for many years a favourite interview question. In theory, you use ambient dose equivalent rate to control effective dose. You don't in practice. The wonderful thing about ambient dose equivalent rate measurement is if you're going to put someone into a fairly high dose rate job, you go in there, you do a survey, and you say, the person will stand here. The dose rate at this point is 200 microsieverts per hour. The job will take an hour and a half, so they shouldn't end up with more than 300 microsieverts on their dose meter. That's what it's for. And hopefully you go in, and we've all done that. So is this reasonable? This is the thing about 20 or 30% under. I think that's, Michael, is that the sort of number you'd go for? Mm-hmm. So it's usually a bit lower. Yeah, you end up, and quite often the dose, you'd work from dose rate with ambient times time. Compared to the badge, it's, you've overestimated, or the dose meter comes in about 20 or 30% low. Hurrah! Excellent. That's what it's for. But people like messing around with quantities and units. It's quite fun. And somebody wants to change ambient dose equivalent to an envelope from, this is the thing, I'll read the top bit. Well, you read the top bit, I'm not reading the top bit. What it basically means is that from about 12 kV up to 100 kV, the future instruments will give a lower answer. An instrument designed to measure this proposed quantity will give a good bit lower answer than the current ones do. Okay. And you think, well, fair enough. If I spent my life at 30 kV, I could spend 2.5 times longer standing there, in theory, if I was controlling an ambient dose equivalent. Not a lot of people have to worry about these energies. It's great medical, dental, veterinary X-ray set exposure, but people don't tend to get high doses from that. So, what is it? Let's think about the uncertainties associated with radiation protection measurement. Let's start off with, we don't know much. For X and gamma radiation, we know very little about practical radiation fields in the workplace. We know everything about the source. We know what it emits, we know the nuclides present quite often, we know the decay schemes really well. But if it's a source of some significance, we're standing looking at this thing through 3 feet of concrete or something like that. So what comes to us is often very ambiguous, quite often being irradiated from a different direction with a different energy of radiation coming from. So we don't really understand the energy and angular distribution in the workplace from the vast majority of situations. And if we put someone in there, and we're talking about this lowish energy component, then obviously your body mass index has something of a kind of influence on the dose to your particular organs. You can see the guys' different sizes in the bottom left, they make a big difference. So, and When this came up, I phoned around my various comrades and I found a range of 3 in the body and the weights of radiation workers that I've drunk beer with, as an example. Between 8 stone from Granny and 24 stone from a guy who's known occasionally as Big Dave. And so that has a tremendous, I would propose that if you're talking about these relatively low energies, that would have a significant effect on the dose per unit exposure for these people, which we don't pay any attention to. Okay, so we've got an uncertainty there. You add in the cellular biology, the real radiobiological effectiveness of the radiation is depositing energy in each organ. We don't understand the effect of RBE really well. We don't understand the overall sensitivity of each organ of the human body, its radiosensitivity. We have numbers for it, and we don't really understand the dose rate effects. This is wonderfully, this is sparkly ionizing radiation and all that. That's deliberate. And we add in the estimated detriment. Average human risk factor, we don't really understand. Individual variation, we don't have any real idea about. And then we have all the synergistic influences. Smoking, drinking, being overweight, and immune system suppression all have huge influences on it. So if you look at our uncertainties, we've got a large uncertainty in the physics, i.e. how much energy have we actually deposited in this testes or ovary or whatever. We have a large uncertainty in the cellular biology. We don't understand really quite clearly the effect of cellular of the radiation response to the organ. And we've got enormous uncertainty and detriment. So the final estimate, we go through this, we don't really understand the consequences of exposure at an individual detailed level. So an individual, the uncertainty is enormous. So why bother to change the monitoring quantity? What is the point? The change is only really significant below 100 keV. The current radiation quantity is conservative. It's on the cautious side, fine, that's good. We need to redesign instruments. Now, I love messing around with instruments' energy responses. It's such fun. That moment when you fit the curve and you look at it and go, wow, that's gorgeous. But that is real anorak stuff, in honesty. So we need to redesign the instruments and retrain the staff. Do you want to do those of us with operational health physics responsibilities? We don't really want to retrain the staff on this. And we have a resultant period of confusion. The last time we went through this, the famous Everline RO2, there are about 5 different RO2 combinations. We don't want even more. And we're going to be making a change of a few tens of %. Good stuff. But the joke is, we ignore the known higher RBE for these radiation qualities anyway, these radiation energies. So we're happy to ignore, we'll say, we're not going to take account of the RBE. We know the RBE is about 2 for these lower energy radiation. So why do we want to mess around with the instrument characteristics? The really important things about radiation monitoring is it helps you predict what you get on someone's dose meter. And that's the real point of it all. So it helps you keep well within dose limits, and it helps you encourage dose minimization. That's what instrumentation is for. And your measurements will be in decent agreement with the regulators. This is very important. You're standing there, you take a reading, you say it's 5 microsieverts per hour. The forces of law and order turn up and go, no, it's 20, you're nicked. Well, you don't want that to happen. Now, neither of us believe that 5 and 20, there's anything really serious about these, but we have to get the same reason. Cost-benefit analysis, why should we bother to change? Negligible, even negative RP benefit, the recost, the tremendous costs, the confusion, the chaos, and all that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like your support in arguing with my ex-governor, the excellent Dr. David Bartlett, because I'm going to tell him, let's not bother, it's not worth it. So I hope I can count on your support in this matter. Right. Let's talk about public perception. Anyway, why not? Sorry. Right, the gentleman in the bottom right-hand corner. That's right. Who is it organisationally referred to as? The Sweeney. Great. Proper policing. Get your drawers on, you're nicked. Great stuff. Have we changed it? What helps? And we have changed the public perception in many ways, I think. Demystification. The 1950s, those of us who grew up in the 50s and 60s, like George Hunter and things like that, science was wonderful, and we were acolytes at the feet of this tremendous thing. And we like to pretend it was a bit different or a bit special and other people couldn't really understand it and all this sort of stuff. Fortunately, we got rid of that. And if you tell people that gamma radiation is only light with an attitude and alphas and betas neutrons are only bits of atoms going rather quickly, then they begin to go, oh, is that all? Yeah, you've got to take it a bit further than that, but that's the start. It's bad for you in large quantities, but what isn't? Can anyone think? I spent ages thinking of things that I couldn't think of anything that wasn't bad for you in large quantities. It is, ultimately, everything is bad for you in large quantities. It's a doddle to detect and measure, isn't it? If you speak to people who do radiobiological stuff and chemical stuff, we buy a thing for £1,000, we wander around and we make a perfectly decent measurement at levels we know have insignificant health effects. For £1,000 on a square centimetre by square centimetre basis. No other subject, I think, has that ability to do it that quickly and that efficiently. Taking an instrument outside, we used to do it at NRPB. NRPB appeared to be designed for this sort of teaching because it was a generally very low background. Outside it had red bricks, which were a bit more active, and then some genius, or by design, maybe it was John Dunster, it's possible, had decided that the gutters should be made of granite blocks, which is a bit weird in Oxfordshire. And so you can go around and you get, if you take your friendly local mini synth, you can get 3 counts per second or 3 or 4 counts per second in the building and 20 and 30 outside in the gutter. And saying to people, take this outside, don't break it, it's quite expensive, have a wander around, come back. They come back and say, right, it's fine. I didn't realise it was that variable. I said it's probably the world's best understood pollutant. We don't understand it that well, in all honesty, but it's probably the best overall. Background dominates. Non-medical uses, consequences are tiny, the vast majority of people. And it's got some very determined regulators, hasn't it, gentlemen? I see at least a couple of one determined regulator, next regulator here. I think Inspector Jack Regan is delighted to compare to 1 or 2 of them. we have a very robust regulatory system. So, there we go. Where's another one? And don't wear excessive PPE for small risks. Don't get overly tooled up for the purpose. This is it. It's a quote. It's a John Dunster quote. I mean, we didn't make a drama out of a crisis, says John Dunster, director of the NRPB, and that was right. We dealt with this, but we did not do the hysterical chickens bit. It was done. It was done energetically and efficiently at NRPB, and with a bit of style, I think, but we never got panicked about it, and that came straight down from John. We will not panic about this. Returning students at Heathrow. We didn't turn up with the van with all the people in the white suits and things. We turned out with Barry Holiday wearing his tweed jacket. The gentleman to Barry's to the right, if I'm looking rather worried, is our then press officer, Matt Gaines, hoping Barry wasn't going to say something radical. And Danny turned up in jeans and a t-shirt, and he set about monitoring the return passengers. One guy in a tweed jacket, and another guy in jeans and a t-shirt. So that immediately, when the students got off the plane feeling rather worried, they immediately realised these 2 guys standing there looking very relaxed, grinning at them, were at the opposite. That made them feel a lot better. Litvinenko. If you're holding a monitor, you can tell when it's going bad on you, so if you don't think there's a need for lots of PPE, don't put it on, because you're the person with the survey equipment. You can tell what's going to go bad with you. You can back off. Gloves always did. 5 to 10 becs per square centimetres overshoes. Anything over 30, barrier off. Full kit only for areas with poor ventilation potential. Now, this is Cheryl Boucher. Now, what is wrong with this picture? What can we see? Those are instrument techies amongst us. What's sticking up? It's a bit difficult to see, but you can spot a little blob of Tipex. Now, I always thought that was what Photoshop was for, to remove little blobs of Tipex, but it's almost not. I have no problem with little blobs of Tipex. But it was two sensible campaigns. I think these were lessons to be remembered. Don't frighten people by turning up looking like men from Mars. And no PPE quickly can sometimes be better than lots of PPE slowly. That's a subject of frequent discussion amongst health physics and operation managers, isn't it? If I get properly tooled up, it'll take me an hour. If I hold my breath, rush in there and hit it with a spanner and run out again, it'll take me 3 minutes. Discuss the consequences, the relative consequences of it. Some of us have been. Anyone been in that situation, had that debate? Yeah, a few hands discreetly raised there. Well done. Okay. And what about the professional protester? I'm glad our esteemed president actually mentioned this geezer's name, because Shelley said, well, you better not do that. I said, oh, no, never mind. I think be prepared to get in the fight if we think they're wrong. There's far too many of us have been overly polite and backed off and things like that. If they are right, and it happens, agree with them and fix it. Occasionally they do. There's one wonderful circumstance where Greenpeace, I think it was, found out that plutonium was going further up the estuary, up the rivers around Sellafield, and Sellafield at that point appreciated, because the Greenpeace had taken their mini SINT and they had found 60 kV X-rays a little bit higher upstream than they thought. So what did Sellafield do? They went and dealt with it. Talk to the press. Don't be frightened. Demolish any dodgy statements. Go where they were and make a real measurement. If they're wrong, make sure any sponsoring organisation realises they are an embarrassment. How much longer have I got, Gav?
15 minutes.
Okay, right. This is it. This is a good story. Lots of nice German instruments have little knobs on the front, what you press. And it says cobalt 60, phosphorus 32, carbon 14. Things like that. On the contamination model, all it does is take the counts per second and divide by an appropriate number. Fair enough. One day, long time ago, Greenpeace let themselves into what was then called DRIG by cutting a hole in the chain link fence. And they went in there equipped with one of these nice German contamination models, large area proportional counter, and they stood there and went, click, look, americium 241, click, look, Pluto 239, click, cobalt 60 cesium. Oh, it was all there, standing there in the dark, 6 feet off the ground, press the button. And NRPB was asked to have a view on this. We'd always said in our postgrad courses that you had to be awfully aware of what these buttons did. They were just calibration factors. They did not make them selective in any sense. And we got the Border TV video for a review, and we wrote a very polite letter explaining why this is what it did, and all it did was take the counts per second and divide by 5 or 7 or 23 or whatever, depending on the nuclide, and didn't make it at all selective. And then one day the phone rang, and I won't mention the name, and I said, "Good morning, Mr. So-and-so," and it all went very quiet, because we were having coffee at the time, and all these ears went. And all of a sudden I was standing in the middle of about 7 people, and I was holding the phone like this. And I said, who was this gentleman who'd raving on about this, what I'd said, and I said, "Could I just hold, could you bear with me a moment?" I asked one of my colleagues to go and get the manual. And I said, "Can I just point out that on page 7, Mr. So-and-so, in 24-point bold, halfway down the right-hand side, it said, 'Be well aware this is merely a calibration factor. This does not make it in any way selective.'" And this gentleman, who was a nuclear expert, had advised Greenpeace this instrument was suitable and would do this for them. He doesn't work there anymore. Well, there's a thing now, isn't it? Good. So, be helpful, I think, is always the case. I have always been a great believer in a well-informed opposition, and a sensible and intelligent opposition, because it's a great counter. It makes you think. It asks difficult questions that perhaps we've forgotten to think about. But a well-informed and intelligent opposition is a delight, because it will make sure you are not missing something. It'll come back and haunt you. It will help you not miss things. So anyway, the professional protester, I think, again, this is something that the society should be perhaps inclined to stand up and be counted for. The SRP have set up a group to consider this, and we find that Dr. X's, Mr. Y's, Professor Z's statements untenable for the following reasons. It'd be nice to do that. Focus for Advice in the UK. When John Dunster was round, it was NRPB. We very jealously guarded this, but that's like what they paid us for. It focused on radiation protection, but now it's, PHE have got other things to worry about. They have to worry about SARS. They have to worry about something to go around the world and kill people in the millions. So we don't have quite that focus. I think it's a huge opportunity for SRP to stand up. I think increasingly, if we don't take it, who is going to do this, really? Who is better qualified to do this than the Society for Radiological Protection, but to deal with those major points of discussion on radiation protection, its philosophy, its progress, and its application. Because look at the membership. We've got diverse experience. Nobody better placed in the world when it comes to talk about what happens in the UK. Huh? We can turn out someone who understands everything, really. Okay. Anyway, so I think there's a future for radiation protection. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I won't be around to find out, but some of you will be. You should have seen how bad this was at the beginning. I got a variety of people. No, you can't. No, that's not. You can't say that. Say it like this instead. Mr. Angela Bartlett should be there on well. So these are the people who've helped make this a lot better than it is. So hopefully, I haven't offended too many people. That's the end, boss.
Are there any questions for Pete?
Son.
I've got one for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go on.
You sort of touched on it a little bit about training, and I was just wondering what areas will we have to work harder on with respect to training in the future?
Well, the answer is if we think we've got the capacity to spread unsealed radioactivity around, we need to be able to deal with that. And in all honesty, we very rarely see it now for real. And so we got this thing that when it happens, we'll be expected to deal with this, but we won't be very experienced in dealing with it itself. And it'd be nice for the SRP to help people deal with real radioactivity. The simulators are great, but nothing beats real radioactivity. So those of us from universities who can run short half-life radioactive material, maybe they'd like to make some real contamination. Because there's nothing quite like finding the real stuff and dealing with it. I'll go back. Michael, sorry to victimise you, but when you was a lad, did you have real radioactivity to deal with sometimes? It did. But now the chance of this it goes down every year, doesn't it? You still get the opportunity. Yeah. I think it'd be nice for the SRP to see whether we could run things one day with real radioactivity. Difficult, but worth it. I can see Alan. You agreeing with me, Alan? No, Alan. Mr. Marsh is not agreeing with me. Partially agreeing with me. That's good. Well, it depends. That's the advantage of electron capture nuclides with a 3-hour half-life, isn't it? You do the dose assessment. That's what I mean about not being too terrified about it. If we do this, the person involved in this exercise, the effective dose will be 1 microsievert. Maybe that's a reasonable, in exchange for training to deal with some real decontamination. I think that's a reasonable bargain. And I think maybe that's the sort of thing I think we should be a bit more gung-ho about doing. How's that? Is that an answer?
Yeah, Pete, could I ask, you mentioned about wanting support for not changing the conversion coefficient. How on earth do we best, I agree, it's absolutely ludicrous, how do we go about making sure that doesn't happen?
Well, I think the answer is, again, that's what the SRP is for. When it comes to the proposal, we will be given it to review, and we go back to the Society for Radiological Protection and view of this, and the way I would be doing it is saying, these are the advantages that we see. These appear to be trivial. These are the disadvantages to us. These appear to be significant. So we see no reason why we should spend money, do the retraining, have different varieties of instruments and achieve essentially no radiological improvement for a rather large expenditure. And that's the way I do it. And what I would really miss is that nice link between the survey monitoring instrument reading and what we expect on someone's dose meter. And that's an opportunity for the society to come back with a view and a robust view at that. So I think that's what we're for now.
Is there a proposal to change the other conversion coefficients?
It wasn't
The
the last time I looked, but we must follow. I think what I'm saying is basically we must keep an eye on this, because those of us who lived through the exposure to ambient dose equivalent chaos, which I'm just looking at Duncan here.
It was 20 years before.
Yes, we took us 20 years. That's right.
Generation of instrumentation that actually made a meaningful measure of ambient dose equivalent.
That's right.
A long time, and a lot of money.
Yeah, and so we spend a lot of money and we have a lot of chaos and we achieve very little. So I think when this comes up, the society should step forward and have a group and have a view on this and put forward a considered opinion. And I'm still saying, we don't see the point. That's an interesting one. Wait for the microphone. Wave it, John, and he'll spot you. You can't. You'll be very discreet down there. Go on.
No, I'm just saying there's not an argument for scientific and technical rigour as well. And if, as an industry, we want to have a defensible position, is it not right that we have thorough examination of the science behind it and make arguments based on that rather than vague judgments that you might be suggesting?
Well, what we need is we should be doing cost-benefit analysis. What is the benefit of making this change? And we identify that, we identify it clearly, and then we set against it, and we decide whether there is a benefit, really logically, whether there is any real benefit. And I doubt that there is. It's because do you use a handheld survey instrument to control the dose to an individual organ? I don't. Has anyone done that? Not a lot of hands waving around here. People don't use ambient dose equivalent when they're trying to control the dose to an individual organ. And I think one of the things we don't do, when I was at college, one of the things they said, one of the first things you do with any process is write out an uncertainty budget. And then you concentrate on those things which dominate your uncertainty. You say, this is the big one, can I do anything about it? If I can, I do. I don't worry about the 1% and 2% back there, because they will not contribute to the overall quality of the measurement. And I think we have to consider an overall measurement quality argument. But I think the argument, a lot of it comes down to the fact that we're all working on standard people. Now, I'm approximately a standard person. Lots of us aren't standard people. It tells my height, weight, and all that sort of jazz. And we know that. So I think we want to admit to the fact that we live in a world of approximations with this process, but they are acceptable approximations and well understood approximations. That's not bad science. Are you happy with that? Or do you want to bring an extra point? Because I think it is, you bring up a good point. This will be what I'll get is, we should do this better because. And I'm saying, well, I think, yes, there is some argument for this, but there's an awful lot of weight against it. And I think it's the operational organisational expense, because let's be honest, radiation protection is an expense. You want to discharge your duties under the law and to the regulator and to society in an efficient way, but without spending too much money on it.
Roger?
Pete, I'm here.
Well, wait.
I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Changing the subject, moving it on a little. One of your reflections was that people in 50 years' time, looking back at us, could possibly take the view that we were too cautious. So what should we do?
Well, it's that is a good one, isn't it? Most of the time I come from it, it tends to get very obviously at me when we're doing the licensing exercises, and we spend an awful lot of time worrying about very small levels of radioactivity and things like that, which again costs us time and money. You can consider that perhaps it's the sheer taking of pains that's important, that being seen to take pains actually wins the political credibility argument. But I do worry that we spend an awful lot of money worrying about small risks. And I thought the CT scan example was rather good. It just struck me what a good example it was. And we do worry an awful lot about policing waste sites and waste sites when they cease to be waste accepting and when they cease to be managed and things like that. I just feel that, let's be honest, the regulators, the environmental regulators, set rather a high bar on some of these things. And it comes down, ultimately, it comes down to cost, really. I think that's the point. Isn't it? It costs an awful lot more to do it a little bit better. And we need to catch the bottom of that graph somewhere or the top, depending which way you look at it. But I'm sure you said something much more coherent and organized this morning on the same subject.
I think a lot of this being overcautious, it was the SRP meeting last year or the year before, I can't remember, it's all a blur, where one of the speakers said, we have this real problem that we allow members of the public to have, we tell members of the public they have quite a large dose each year because of natural radiation, and then with imposing these stupidly low limits on man-made radiation, the speaker then said we give the public this idea that man-made radiation is so much more harmful to us than the natural stuff. And I know I'm terrible, I won't use sunbeds because I know that's man-made UV to get a suntan, and that's bad for me, I could get skin cancer, but I'm naive enough in my head to think that lying on a beach in sunlight is natural, so that's fine, I won't get melanoma.
We're doomed, Jan!
I know, absolutely, it's my warped sense, we all have priorities. And I don't know if the public will think we're being too cautious now if we ever manage to change that perception. And then they'll think, why were they restricting our dose from man-made stuff when it's trivial in comparison to natural? And I think that's an area we need to try and work on with the public to change this.
It's always been this thing, as you say, the natural we've grown up with, unnatural is different. And I think when you say we all suffer from this. I had a friend of mine quit because he got a committed dose of 100 microsieverts. From an intake of what was it? Neptunium. He actually quit his job. I found out he was a keen caver. I said, my God, I said, you happily get 2 millisieverts on this entry, and when you quit for 100 microsieverts in the next 50 years, Meadowcroft. He said, he went, yeah. I said, we're just doomed if someone with your level of education can't do it. But it's something built in humans. Natural is good and unnatural isn't. And it all comes to the point, it's a matter of spending money sensibly. I think this is one of the things, it's what the point of the first bit was, that society at the moment, we're a very rich society, and we have the money to spend on this luxury. And I could see if times got a bit harder, it would be one of the things that got the chop quite quickly, because if we're living much closer to the bone, if life's a bit more of a struggle, then we won't worry so much about radiation as much as we did. There was a cracking thing that was on TV on one of these marginal channels called Chernobyl Wolves. Now, it might be in a bit of a whitewash job, but look it up on TV, on the computer. It's a public broadcasting thing from the USA, and it's very good. And the answer is, in a world which is full of risks, hazards, and something like that, it's very difficult to find ionising radiation sticking up that far, even in Chernobyl. Well, it's if you're a field goal. But the argument is they've had 60 generations, so if we want to, we'd have to wait 1,500 years to achieve the same amount of environmental experience as field goals.
Roger, do you want to?
Yep. Pete, you described yourself as an instrument geek. As a customer who came to you to be saved by an instrument geek, how do we reckon we're doing for the next generation of instrument geeks? If I'm still about and you're not, who am I going to go and scream help to next time?
Well, there's a rising generation of instrument geek, which is nice. It's been quite fun. We've quite recently met quite a few people at uni and going through apprenticeships and things like that who genuinely find instrumentation interesting. We will never have the same number of small companies and government-sponsored development that we do now, because increasingly we're getting, like any domestic object, we're getting increasingly into larger and larger blocks of smaller numbers of larger companies. But I'm reasonably confident we've actually got succession planning in. It could be interesting.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, indeed, I think so. I think the thing is, it's because it's sufficiently interesting. You never get rich doing radiation monitoring equipment, but it just hits the spot slightly. You think, oh, I really find this interesting. So people will do it, yeah. If there's a need, people will do it, yes. But we need to be, one of the things, again, for the society and people like us, is to promote this sense of fun and enthusiasm and things like that. We have, I think Duncan will admit, we had a great time, didn't we? We did. There you go, that's it. That's the best part of the argument. We enjoyed doing this. You will enjoy doing it. And I think the chairman wants to move on.
Oh, can I just come back quickly?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to disagree with you, Pete.
Oh, yeah? Go on. Go on,
Yeah,
be content. Not that we've ever disagreed in any way.
I do think there's a little bit of a problem with succession planning for instrumentation geeks. I think that nowadays a lot of people that might have stayed in the instrumentation field are moving to becoming RPAs, because I think RPA is seen as the better structured and more sexy route and perhaps pays a bit better. And I think there's a real problem in recognising the expertise involved in being an instrumentation expert, and people are choosing possibly the slightly easier route of being an RPA than understanding instruments properly, like you do. So I think there is a problem.
Well, there you go. You got two views. Oh, you see, I told you, Roger. I told you that humanity was incurably optimistic. Yeah, Jan, to some extent, right? Yes. We stopped recruiting in the radiation business for an awfully long time, full stop. Anyway, which put a bit of a dent in things. It's just, I suppose I've run across. I think it might be easier to get. I don't know, there's something, you're just burbling, aren't you? I've met a lot of good people who are less than 20, who are less than 30, who find instrumentation really interesting. And I think, well, we'll look at places like Sellafield. You do get people coming forward who are genuinely interested. And they come either through the graduate or through the industrial training processes, really do like it. And yeah, that's it. But you are right, Roger. That I think that, in fact, Jan's point is we will need to be prepared to sell this idea to people fairly well. I think that's certainly true, yeah. Because it doesn't look like a tremendous way of making a living in some ways.
Right, I think we're going to have to move on. The tea and bickies beckon back in the exhibition hall. Can I just get you to thank Pete Burgess one more time, please?